Okay, we last left off where the $100 monkey had taken all of the apples out of the traps and warned the other monkeys not to get anywhere close to it. And Jayberry and Rowdy had taken off to go exploring and see if they could find another place, and he decided that he was going to hide his traps in the stump of that hollow log. So let's keep going. Not far away at the upper end of an old slough, the cold, clear water of a spring gushed out from under the roots of a huge gum tree. I always figured that the spring belonged to Rowdy and me. We had discovered it on one of our exploring trips. I had even named it Jayberry's Spring. We had a good drink, and I washed my hot face in the cool water. There was never a time that Rowdy and I prowled those Cherokee bottoms that we didn't run into any kinds of surprises. But when I got back to the bur oak tree, I got the biggest surprise of my life. Everything I owned was gone. My gunny sack, lunch, apples, traps, and all. "Rowdy," I said, looking around, "I know I left that sack right here by the stump. Now it's gone, and everything we had was in it. I wonder what happened to it." Rowdy started sniffing around the stump. Then he trailed over to a big sycamore, reared up on it, looked at me, and whined. "What are you doing that for, boy?" I asked him. "You know that sack couldn't climb a tree." Regardless of what I said, Rowdy seemed to think the sack had climbed the tree. He started bawling the tree bark. I had never known my old dog to lie, so I looked up into the branches of the big sycamore. What I saw all but caused me to fall over backwards. Sitting on a limb with his back against the trunk was the $100 monkey. He was just sitting there, as big as you please, with a sandwich in one paw and an apple in the other, eating away and looking straight at me. He had passed out my apples to some of the little monkeys. They were sitting around on the limbs, chewing away and peering at me with their beady eyes. I could see my gunny sack with the traps in it draped over the limb. I felt the anger start way down in my feet. It burned its way through my body and exploded in my head. "Why, you thieving rascal!" I yelled. "You can't get away with this. You give that stuff back to me." I saw right away that the big monkey had no intention of giving anything back to me. He stood up on the limb and started jumping up and down and laughing. This made me so mad I came close to cussing a little. While hanging around my grandpa's store, I had learned a few cuss words from the men, but I never did use them. I was afraid to. Daisy had told me that if any boy who wasn't 21 years old cussed, his tongue would rot out of his head. So I just didn't do any cussing. I didn't figure that I could get along without my tongue. But I was so mad at that monkey, I had to do something. I grabbed up a chunk from the ground and threw it at him as hard as I could. I didn't come close to hitting him, but it made him mad anyway. He let out a squall and threw one of my apples straight at me. I had to jump sideways to keep it from hitting me. The idea of an old monkey throwing something at me was more than I could stand. I went all to pieces. I had a darn good bean shooter, and I was a good shot. I could almost drive nails with it. I jerked it out of my pocket and reached for some ammunition. When I discovered that I didn't have one little rock in my pocket, that really made me mad. It looked like everything in the world was going against me. Not far away was a washout, and the bottom was covered with gravel. I ran over and jumped down in it. Dropping to my knees, I started filling my pockets with small rocks. "Rowdy," I said, "I don't care what that old man of the mountains or anyone else does. I'm not going to let that monkey get away with this. I'll make it so hot for him he'll think that the woods are on fire." With my pocket bulging with ammunition, I climbed out of the wash and ran back to the sycamore tree. The big monkey was still standing on the limb, jumping up and down and laughing his head off. I loaded my bean shooter and pulled the rubbers back as far as I could. Taking dead aim, I let go. Old William Tell himself couldn't have shot any straighter than I did. I plunked that monkey a good one about where his belly button should have been. He let out a squall that could have been heard all over the bottoms and started scratching at the spot where my rock had stung him. I couldn't have been happier. I reared back and laughed as loud as I could. "How do you like that?" I yelled at him. "It's not so funny now, is it? Well, you haven't seen anything yet." Chuckling to myself, I loaded up again, took dead aim, and plunked him another good one. I never should have shot that big monkey the second time, because it made him awfully mad. Turning to all the little monkeys, he uttered a few of those deep grunts, and then every one of them started dropping down from the sycamore tree. This was the last thing in the world I expected the monkeys to do, and I didn't like what was happening at all. I started backing up, one step at a time. "Holy smokes, Rowdy," I said. "They're after us! I didn't think they'd do that, did you?" By the time the big monkey had reached the last limb on the sycamore tree, I had a pretty good head start on him. He stopped there for a second, opened his big mouth, and showed me those long teeth again. I wouldn't have been more scared if someone had thrown a cross-cut saw at me. I dropped my bean shooter and let out a squall that didn't even sound like me. "They're gonna eat us up, Rowdy!" I yelled. "Let's get out of here!" Chapter 5. I was so scared I didn't look for any game trail to follow. I just ran the way I was pointed. Old Rowdy wasn't scared. He would have stayed there and fought those monkeys until the moon came up, but he figured that as long as I was leaving, there was no use in hanging around, so he took off with me. It was tough going through the briars and underbrush. My clothes got hung up a few times, but I didn't stop to untangle them. I just moved on, leaving little pieces of my shirt and overalls hanging on the bushes. I never did look around to see if the monkeys were after me, but I could almost feel the hot breath of that big monkey right on the back of my neck. By the time I had reached the fence around our fields, I looked like the scarecrow in Mama's garden. I flew over the top rail and ran into our field a little way. I stopped then and looked back for the monkeys. They were nowhere in sight. "Rowdy," I said, "I believe those monkeys would eat a fella up, don't you?" From the other end of the field where he was working, Papa saw me when I came flying over the rail fence. "Jay Barry," he hollered. "What's going on down there? Are you all right?" "I'm all right, Papa," I hollered back. "I'm just having a little monkey trouble, that's all." Papa motioned with his hand for me to come to him. After all the bragging I had done about what a good monkey catcher I was, I hated, like the dickens, to go and face him. But I couldn't just run away. He wouldn't have liked that at all. Feeling terrible, I walked over to him. As I walked up, Papa frowned and said, "What were you running from, Jay Barry? And look at your clothes! Why, they're torn all to pieces. What happened anyway?" I couldn't even look at Papa. Poking a finger in one of the holes of my breeches, I said, "I was running from those monkeys, Papa. I guess I got hung up in the bushes and tore my clothes a little." "Running from the monkeys?" Papa said. "Were they after you?" "I think they were, Papa," I said. "I didn't look back to see if they were chasing me, but I'm pretty sure they were after me all right." "Ah," Papa said, chuckling. "Monkeys aren't dangerous. You probably just thought they were going to chase you." "I don't know, Papa," I said. "I wouldn't put anything past those monkeys. They're the smartest things I've ever seen. They sure made a fool out of me." "Made a fool out of you?" Papa said. "Well, how did they do that?" "The little devil stole everything I had," I said. "My traps, my gunny sack, apples, lunch, and all. I guess they've even got my bean shooter by now. When I ran off, I dropped that, too." "I was afraid something like this was going to happen," Papa said. "I think I've read where monkeys can be pretty smart, especially if they've been trained." "It's not the little monkeys, Papa," I said. "They don't seem to have any sense at all. I believe I could catch every single one of them. It's that $100 monkey I'm having trouble with." "I thought all the monkeys looked alike," Papa said. "How can you tell that $100 monkey from the others?" "Oh, that's easy, Papa," I said. "He doesn't even look like the little monkeys. He's much bigger and looks just like a little boy when he's standing up. And is he ever smart. I don't believe anyone could catch him in a trap." "Well, if he's that smart," Papa laughed, 301. Why don't you just forget about catching him and try to catch the little ones? If you could catch all of them, you'd still have a lot of money." "It's not that simple, Papa," I said. "That big monkey is the leader of the pack. He tells them little monkeys what to do and they mind him. He won't let one of them even get close to a trap." Papa frowned and didn't look at me like he could believe what I was saying. "Are you trying to tell me that all those monkeys can talk to each other?" he asked. "They sure can," I said. "And sure as I'm standing here, they can talk to each other. Why, that big monkey even laughed at me. He can turn flips and somersaults and do all things that you wouldn't believe he could do." "Oh, Jayberry," Papa said, "you're just imagining things. Monkeys can't talk to each other. Whatever gave you that idea anyway?" It was getting harder and harder to explain things to Papa. It seemed that the more I talked, the crazier everything sounded. But I wanted him to believe me, so there wasn't but one thing I could do. Start at the very beginning. I told him everything that had happened, from my first go-around with the monkeys until I had sailed over the rail fence. Papa listened to me, but I could see a lot of doubt in his eyes. He just stood there with a frown on his face, looking at me and then at Rowdy. Now and then he would turn and stare off toward the bottoms. Finally, as if he had made up his mind about something, he shook his head, pursed his lips, and blew out a lot of air. Taking the check lines from his shoulders, he wrapped them around the handles of the corn planter and said, "Well, corn or no corn, I'd like to see an animal that's as smart as all that. Come on, let's go and have a look at this smart monkey." If I had found a pony and a 22 lying in the middle of the road, I wouldn't have been more pleased. As long as my papa was with me, I wouldn't have been scared of the devil himself, if he'd had horns on both ends. Papa was as stout as a grizzly bear, and I just knew that if he ever got his hands on that big monkey, he would sack him up. Just as we entered the thick timber of the bottoms, Papa reached down and picked up a club. "I don't think those monkeys will jump on us," he said, "but just in case they do, I think I'll be ready for 'em." "That's a good idea, Papa," I said. "I think I'll get one too." I walked over to an old high-water drift and picked up a club twice as big as the one Papa had. Papa laughed and said, "What are you going to do with that?" "Stick it in the ground and climb it in case that big monkey comes after us?" "That wouldn't do any good, Papa," I said. "It wouldn't do any good at all. Those monkeys can climb better than squirrels can. You ought to see how fast they get around in these trees." When we reached the sycamore where I had last seen the monkeys, I got another surprise. My gunny sack was gone again. We walked all around the big tree and really looked it over. There wasn't a monkey or a gunny sack in it. "Are you sure this is the tree?" Papa asked. "Oh, I know it's the tree, Papa," I said. "See that limb way up there? That's where my gunny sack and traps were. Now they're gone. I guess that big monkey took 'em with him." "Oh, I don't think he could do anything like that," Papa said. "But if he did, he couldn't get very far carrying a sack with steel traps in it. Come on, let's look around a little." Papa didn't know that $100 monkey like I did, or he wouldn't have said anything like that. I was pretty well convinced that the big monkey could do anything a human could do. We walked all around through the bottoms, looking up into the trees for a monkey. We looked and we looked. Even old Rowdy looked and sniffed, but we didn't see hide nor hair of a monkey. About 30 minutes later, Papa wiped the sweat from his brow and said, "It looks like all those monkeys flew the coop, doesn't it?" "They're around here somewhere, Papa," I said. "I know they are. I'll bet right now they're watching every move we make. They're smart. I tell you, they're the smartest things I've ever seen." "Maybe if we make some noise, it would stir them up a little," Papa said. "It's worth a try anyway. You go over there and beat on that old hollow snag with your club, and I'll do some whooping." I walked over to the snag, spit on my hands, and started whacking away with my club. It sounded like a war drum. Papa started whooping. Rowdy didn't know what was going on, but figured as long as we were making noise, he might as well make some too. He started bawling for all he was worth. We made enough racket to scare the hoot owls out of the bottoms, but we sure didn't stir up any monkeys. We listened and listened, but all we could hear was the droning tones of the noise we had made die away in the thick timber. "Well," Papa said, looking at me, "it sure looks like those monkeys have left the country. What are you going to do now?" "There's not but one thing I can do, Papa," I said. "I'll just have to go back and have another talk with Grandpa. Maybe he can tell me what to do. I still believe those monkeys are around here somewhere." "That's not a bad idea," Papa said. "If I know your Grandpa, he's not going to let a bunch of monkeys get the best of him. Not your Grandpa." All the way back to Papa's corn planter, I was feeling terrible. What if those monkeys had left the country? There just wouldn't be any pony or a 22, and that's all there was to it. Papa must have realized how I felt. "I wouldn't feel too bad about this if I were you," Papa said. "If you think those monkeys are still around here, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I'm pretty sure that your Grandpa will come up with something." "I sure hope he does, Papa," I said. It makes me sick to think how close I came to making all of that money and then to wind up without a nickel. If it hadn't been for that smart aleck monkey, I would probably be worth $1 million by now. Papa laughed and said, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you haven't located those monkeys by the time I get this field planted, I'll take a couple days off and we'll both go look for them. I'd still like to see that smart monkey. When Papa said that, it was just like lighting the lamps in a dark room for me. I began to feel better and everything started looking good again. Just as Papa unwrapped the check lines from the handles of the corn planter, he said, As long as you're going to the store, I think you should tell your mother where you're going. She won't worry so much if she knows you're not down in the bottoms. Yes, sir, I said and started for the house. I didn't think I'd have to do any explaining to Mama and Daisy about my monkey trouble, but I should have known better. After all, they were women folk. They were both sitting on the well curb, shelling early peas when Rowdy and I came walking up. Mama looked at me, dropped the peas she had in her hand, and would have thought it was the first time in her life that she had ever laid eyes on me. For heaven's sakes, Jayberry, Mama exclaimed. What on earth happened? How did your clothes get torn like that? Why, nothing happened, Mama, I said, trying to look as surprised as she was. I was just running and got my clothes hung up in the bushes and tore them, that's all. Before Mama could say anything else, Daisy had to put in her nickel's worth. She giggled and said, Jayberry, you look just like my old rag doll did the time Rowdy got hold of her. It had been a terrible day for me. To have a monkey laugh at me was bad enough, but to have a girl laugh at me, even though it was my little sister, it was too much. Mama, I wailed, you better make her stop giggling like that. It's not funny. Mama was so interested in my torn clothes, she ignored my pleas altogether. Jayberry, why were you running? She asked. Was something after you? I decided right then that if I could get out of it, I wouldn't tell Mama everything that had happened down in the bottoms. I was afraid she might put a stop to my monkey hunting, and that was the last thing in the world I wanted. Oh, Mama, I said, what makes you think something was after me? You're all the time thinking things like that. Every time I go to those bottoms, you think something's going to eat me up. You don't see any blood on me, do you? The scared look vanished from Mama's face, and everything would have been all right if it hadn't been for Daisy. She just couldn't leave well enough alone. Did you catch any monkeys, Jayberry? Daisy asked. No, I growled, glaring at her. I didn't catch any monkeys, but I'm going to. Where are your traps and gunny sack? Daisy asked. Boy, 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 I love my little sister very much, but she sure could ask some silly questions. I decided that I'd act like I didn't even hear what she had asked me. Mama, I said, it looks like I can't catch those monkeys with traps, so I'm going back to the store to have another talk with Grandpa. Maybe he can tell me another way I can catch them. Do you need anything from the store? No, Mama said. I don't need anything today, but what did happen to your gunny sack and traps? Did you lose them? I never did like to lie to my Mama, but right then I sure wanted to tell her one. But I didn't. The monkeys got away with them, I said, as if it were something that didn't amount to anything. Well, I'd better be on my way to the store. I'd like to get back before dark. Daisy didn't give me a chance to start to the store. She popped up and said, Did you say the monkeys got away with your traps and gunny sack, Jayberry? How'd they do that? They stole them, I said, almost shouting. That's how they did it. They stole everything I had. Now are you satisfied? Daisy laughed so loud it scared our old hens, and they all started cackling. She grabbed up her crutch and headed for the house, squealing with laughter. Now, Mama, I cried, there she goes again, and you won't say a word to her. You better make her stop. If I laughed at her, you'd jump all over me. Jayberry, Mama said, looking at me real hard, I think you'd better go on to the store before you get into it. But first you go in the house and change clothes. I wouldn't want people to see you looking like that. They'd think you're starving to death. Oh, Mama, I said, people aren't going to think we're starving to death just because I have a few holes in my britches. Every boy in the hills tears holes in his britches. Now look, young man, Mama said, I'm in no mood for an argument. If you want to go to the store, you'd better go change your clothes or you're not going. Grumbling to myself, I went to the house and changed my clothes. See you next time.